Hey everybody, Rosematter here. Welcome to part 9 of my Chaos Head Noah Let's Play. It just gets wilder and wilder with each episode. This time, it is confirmed that the cops are after Takumi. Not surprising, given how very, very suspicious he was in his first encounter with the detectives. So they've been kind of like trailing him. So when he says he's feeling paranoid, he feels eyes on him. In this case, he's not wrong. And after running away from the cops, he ran into Fez, or ISA, who says that the cops have also been asking her questions. And she kept going on about the sword again, and then she just pulled out a sword out of seemingly thin air. And also, like, Takumi had a, like, delusion of seeing two ISAs, and then she said basically, like, your delusions, you can make reality, you need to find a sword. All of this nonsense. And then we also got to the detectives, where Bond was saying about how, like, gravity is a little bit off in certain places, and in Shibuya it's very high, and I believe it's like a GE rate or something like that, and that is what attracts young people to Shibuya. That one's a little bit out there, and they're also saying how, like, that could be the cause of, like, why certain murders are happening in certain places, is because of this gravitational spot. So they said that basically, like, if we seek out areas that have this very high GE rate or whatever it's called, we might be able to predict where the next murder is happening. And then we ended with Takumi seeing a video of the group dive was being recorded by someone who seemed to be in a wheelchair, aka Shogun. So I have no idea. I have no idea what to think about all this, but I'm excited to get back into it, see what happens next, see what craziness we get to see unfold. So without further ado, let's get back into it. To no one's surprise, a leaked video of the group dive exploded. Grimm had told me the entire internet was going insane, and lo and behold, he wasn't lying. A huge chunk of that channel was now convinced all 4 NewGen murders had been committed by the same person. Okay, let's see. Whose eyes are those eyes? It's the new Gen killer signature move. The guy who upped it on YouTube has to be the perp. I'll report that immediately. Whoa, whose eyes are blah blah blah. Written out the scene of the vampire. Yeah, that means there's a connection between the first and last case, despite all people saying they had nothing to do with each other, which means the man-child and crucifixion cases have to be connected. So now they've turned it into, like, an acronym. WEIT, I'll just say, whose eyes are those eyes? His first appearance was at the vampire case, so it couldn't possibly have copied the group dive. Saw the video, but it looks fake as shit. You twats really ought to stop using whose eyes or whatever so often. The killer wants attention, you're giving it to him. They really nail the internet speak. Like, this is exactly how I could see, like, a message board. This is what it would be like. The tower in the video is actually 2 meters tall. There's a trampoline or something below it. Agreed, if the phrase keeps being a trend, there will keep being more murders. Y'all need to tone it the fuck down. It's not just a meme anymore. YouTube videos topping the charts. The view count is skyrocketing. It's so brutal, don't look. Time to make MHK's news is top report. Anything from the perp yet? The news on TV was just as erratic. Okay, I believe there was also a tip. TLDR, net slang, short for too long, didn't read. Perica, a fictional unit of currency that appears in a certain manga. I think I'd already read that. I don't know. Anyway. Like 140 had said, every available station save for TOTV had been interrupted by the breaking news, where they'd played the leaked video on loop. The broadcast had lasted for about an hour. It was pretty shocking to see the footage had actually been broadcast across the entire country. Of course, all the stations censored the parts where they dived off the building at the end, but it was still extremely impactful. The opinions of those on TV were more or less the exact same as everyone's online. They all attributed the 4 NewGen cases to the same culprit. Then again, that wasn't really much of a surprise. They'd finally found a common denominator between them after all. Whose eyes are those eyes? It had become a popular phrase all throughout Shibuya. The phrase had first been shown to the world when the details behind the 4th case, the vampire, was shared. People then learned the victims of the group dive had said it as well, even though it had occurred a month before the vampire case. In the 4 incidents that had occurred so far, had been used in both the first and the last one. It had to mean something. It made the theory a single person was behind the murders all the more probable. The police then held a press conference stating they intended to identify the person who had posted the video as soon as they could. A number of politicians mentioned or commented that the actions of the culprit were completely deplorable. They needed to be apprehended immediately. You think it'd be easy as just finding like the IP address of whoever uploaded it? Someone who like uploads on YouTube, I imagine it'd be very easy for someone to be able to find exactly who uploaded it. It'd be wild if like the police came banging on Takumi's door. It's like it turned out while he was in like his sleep, like while he was sleepwalking, he actually was the one who uploaded it. The YouTube video had been removed by a moderator less than 3 hours after it was uploaded, but by then it was too late. Yep, nothing stays off the internet forever. That channel had already gotten their hands on it, and from there, nothing could have stopped it from being re-uploaded and spreading like wildfire. And then, just before midnight, the following facts had been revealed through the police statement. The group dive video was uploaded from a computer located in a Shibuya manga cafe known as @Cafe. It was uploaded from a specific private room in the facility, room number 37. Oh my goodness. And that's easy enough. He always uses the same one. Yep, they're definitely coming after him. I sat paralyzed in my seat, my head hanging low as I hugged myself tightly. Without realizing it, I had started eavesdropping. I was becoming hypersensitive to the voices coming from my surroundings. I overheard a lot of conversations, and unsurprisingly, the group dive video was the topic on everyone's minds. Some girls were even jokingly saying to each other, "Whose eyes are those eyes?" I bit my lip and let my gaze wander onto the surface of my desk. That video was evidence. Evidence that Shogun actually existed. Evidence that I hadn't killed anyone. It proved I didn't have multiple personalities. The old-looking man in a wheelchair was the NewGen killer. But why would Shogun even upload it? Why would he hint at himself being the killer when the culprit's identity had been shrouded in mystery so far? Only two explanations made sense to me. One, Shogun was showing off by killing people because it amused him, which was pretty likely considering the time when he'd appeared in front of me. Or he was trying to provoke me. For some reason, Shogun and his underling Yua were doing everything in their power to fuck with me. I didn't know the reason why, I just knew they were trying to frame me as the NewGen culprit. At this point, even the police were probably suspicious of me. Shogun was trying to corner me.
僕のメッセージは受け取ってくれた？目覚めるんだ。早く出ないと。もっとたくさんの人が死んじゃうことになるから。忘れないで。君は逃げちゃいけない。
When he'd appeared in front of me, that was what he'd said. It felt like he had been trying to intimidate me, and that he was basically saying, "I'm going to kill you too, don't you dare run away." And now he had totally blindsided me by uploading that video and making sure it spread all throughout Japan. There was no doubt that Shogun had moved his plan to the next phase. It had been naive to think I wasn't being targeted anymore. If anything, it'd be more accurate to say his plotting against me had moved from passive to active. It was now finally in full swing. I was terrified, especially of that video. Shogun had killed 5 high schoolers without even lifting a finger, despite being even worse off physically than me. If all the NewGen cases were actually his doing, then all those other gruesome murders, the man-child, crucifixion, and vampire had all been enacted by the same frail body. Or maybe Yua had helped him out. In any case, I didn't have any faith I'd be able to defend myself against people who'd commit such horrible atrocities. Just thinking of them sent chills down my spine. Chills that combined with the red-hot anger I was feeling. Why was I being targeted like this? What did I do to deserve it? And there was also that message. Whose eyes are those eyes? If I wasn't careful, I would start trembling uncontrollably. To keep that under control, I had to keep my body from relaxing. I had to always be aware of my surroundings and be ready to bolt the second I sensed someone approaching. I didn't know when Shogun or Yua would show themselves again. Hell, I had no guarantee Yua was Shogun's only underling. Maybe even my own classmates were under his influence, their laughter and idle chatter acting as mere camouflage until just the right moment. I had to find a way to parry surprise attacks like the one in @Cafe yesterday. If I didn't, I'd be killed next time for sure. I needed to get a D-sword ASAP. The only way out of this was to get a D-sword. I'd internalized what Ayase and Senna had said, and I'd searched online about it, and it all had me convinced. Getting my hands on a D-sword would save me. The night before, I desperately tried to gather information on D-swords while keeping an eye on the NewGen's shitstorm, but my research barely bore any results. I cradled my head, tearing at my greasy hair. How was I supposed to find a D-sword?
見つけなくちゃいけない。自分自身で。方法なんて私にはわからないの。
Ayase had said that, but that was barely even a hint. My thoughts weighed heavily on me. I was starting to freak out. My heart was steadily getting crushed by anxiety. I needed to hurry and find a D-sword. Whatever it took, I had to find one. If I didn't, I'd be done for. Before becoming NewGen's next victim, I had to find one. But I needed to find out how. I had no clue how you were supposed to get one. I needed some kind of hint, something, anything. I had to figure it out fast, or I'd lose my chance at finding it. Was I even capable of finding one? This was no time to be at school. It was my own life or graduating. I didn't need to debate which one was more important. And yet, why was I... Sensing someone approaching, I quickly raised my head and braced myself for contact. I bet it's either... the only two people who talk to him, which is Masumi or... Oh my gosh, why am I blanking on her name? Rimi. Rimi was standing there, blinking repeatedly, as if she'd been stunned by my sudden movement. I made you jump? Stop scaring me like that. All the stress in my body released at once, and I crumpled on top of the desk with a big sigh. Fulfilling her usual quota, Rimi peered into my face. I hurriedly lowered my eyes. Was Rimi with me or against me? An ally or an enemy? After she had saved me, I'd grown a lot less wary of her. But there were still a ton of unanswered questions I'd yet to figure out. I mean, in his mind, Yua seemed quite nice, right? And then she turned on him. Like why she'd been covered in blood at the scene of crucifixion. Or how we were supposed to be such good friends and that we'd been classmates since our first year, yet I had no recollection of it. Rimi tilted her head slightly, a worried expression on her face. I turned away from her. I couldn't say it to her face. When the classes for the day finally ended, I felt like every ounce of energy had been drained from my body. Even during class, all I had done was remain on high alert, repeatedly scanning my surroundings. I hadn't slept since yesterday, but staying this vigilant kept me wide awake. The school day felt like an eternity. The sheer amount of time I'd spent there sent me spiraling into a deep depression. Why is it the way we perceive time changes depending on our mood? Some say that time flows at a constant rate, but that might not actually be true. The speed of time changes depending on each person's subjective perspective. I've always theorized it's a conspiracy to... Man, he's got a lot of conspiracies, doesn't he? Homogenize humanity's understanding of the concept of time by implementing units like seconds and hours, all so they can deceive people into forgetting that perception of time varies from person to person. Building off that theory, if the length of time is dependent on each person's perception, then conversely, doesn't that mean the flow of time can be controlled at will? As I thought about that, I remembered Senna talking about controlling other people's wills. And conversely,
生まれながらに目が不自由な人でも目の前にある景色がちゃんと見えるようになる。ビデオカメラのような映像機器を介してね。
Video data from a camera is converted into electrical signals that are sent directly to the brain, causing the person to observe that sequence of images. Conversely, that would mean converting the images a person observes into electrical signals and sending them to equipment that can render video. The aforementioned equipment doesn't have to be a video camera either. For example, what would happen if you connected a person to a hard disk recorder and showed them recordings of someone's vacation? What if instead of real-life recordings, you showed them an anime? Technically, anime is 2D and therefore delusionary. But people who are blind from birth have never seen anything from the 3D world. So if they were shown an anime and told, this is how the world is, they'd believe the 2D world is reality, right? I just realized that it has been a long time since he has had a delusion where he saw Sarah. That used to be pretty frequent, and then I think ever since things escalated, like even she is not appearing to him to help him out. To that person, that delusion would be their reality. A delusion perceived as reality. Oh, okay. Here's another example. Oh, I feel like I can't remember which one I did last time, if it was a good or a bad one. We're going to choose a bad one. I mean, he's feeling pretty bad right now, so... If person A sent an image from their brain to a hard disk recorder that processed it and transmitted the image to person B's brain, then person A's delusion would become person B's reality. Delusion becoming reality. In theory, it was possible. Holy shit, I was a genius. I was over the moon by how brilliant my theory was. Maybe that was how I'd acquired a D-sword. Ayase had said they had something to do with delusions, hadn't she? Alright, I should hurry up and go home so I can look it up. I left the classroom and started heading toward the school entrance, but partway there I changed my mind and instead turned and headed toward the building where the first-year classrooms were located. I figured it might be a better idea to avoid the entrance I usually took. I couldn't rule out the possibility that Shogun and Yua were lying in wait to ambush me. So I opted to leave using a different route. I made my way to the first-year building via the breezeway. The final bell had already rung a little bit ago, so while the students on cleaning duty or doing club shit were still around, basically, everyone who'd opted to go straight home already had. School always felt somewhat lonely, or even wistful after the final bell rang. No matter where I went, it always felt that way, whether they were ancient buildings made of wood or newer structures like Sume. Well, not that I'd ever set foot in any wooden school buildings in anything other than eroge. Regardless, the school's interior was simmering under a thick veil of silence. I walked quickly down the hall, surrounded by that silence, trying my best to keep my footsteps as quiet as possible. The setting sun... Oh, I heard a wheelchair. The setting sun shining through the windows warmed me. Typically, I kept my head low when I walked, but since there weren't any other students, I opted to keep my eyes focused on what was ahead of me. This allowed me the chance to survey my environment, ensuring there were no suspicious figures lurking about. I heard something. A sound. What was that? I feel like I've heard it before. Immediately after I heard it, I saw something cross the hallway of the first-year building in front of me. It was an empty wheelchair. The video of the group dive I'd watched yesterday resurfaced in my mind. A chill ran down my spine and I froze. The wheelchair finished crossing the hallway and then it disappeared from sight. And right after it did, I heard an insanely loud sound. Silence settled back on the campus. I took a second to catch my breath and then I looked in the direction where the sound had come from. What was that just now? Why was there a wheelchair in the school, not to mention one with nobody sitting in it? The crash I'd heard at the end was probably the sound of the wheelchair falling down the stairs. With the noise it had made, it must have taken a fair deal of damage. It wouldn't surprise me if it had been rendered practically unusable. I quickly looked around me. Rather than being calming, the silence only made my fears skyrocket. I at least knew I couldn't see anyone moving from my current position. However, I felt a gaze. Don't look at me. Oh God, Shogun? He'd come here? To the school? Why had he come here? Was it to meet Yua? Was it to meet with me? I took a step back and nearly toppled over. However, I somehow managed to keep my balance. I was thoroughly creeped out. Was he trying to harass me? Why wasn't he showing his face? It would have been so much more bearable if he just showed himself. I was hit with an intense wave of nausea. I wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. Covering my mouth, I moved back to where I'd come from. I bolted down the stairs and out the building. I ran through the courtyard with no real destination in mind until I could no longer hold back the urge to vomit. The second I fell to my knees, the entire contents of my stomach began spilling out. The stomach acid made my throat burn. My vision blurred from tears. It was hard to breathe. The aftertaste was absolutely vile. I must have been way more maxed than I thought I was. It might have been because of the all-nighter I'd pulled. As I wiped the corners of my mouth, I looked around me restlessly, but I couldn't see a soul. However, the shadowy corners and blind spots I'd never usually pay attention to had become terrifying to me. I began to think Yua and Shogun might be hiding in them. The second my brain came up with that, I could no longer take a single step. Someone save me. I wanted to cry. Felt nauseous all over again. And once again, we're not seeing the waves. We're not seeing the little wavy things, which means this could be happening? Question mark? I didn't end up vomiting, but I dry heaved several times. The pain made me cry even harder. I was nearly sobbing at this point. But then suddenly, someone's hand began to gently rub my back. Terrified, I turned around.
大丈夫。
Rimi was there.
大丈夫だよ。
I wasn't being condemned for feeling this way. No, her words were a tender affirmation.
私はタクの味方だから。
She didn't even so much as grimace at the smell of my vomit. She didn't show any signs of disdain when she saw my face covered in tears or snot, nor when she saw the vomit still clinging to the corners of my mouth. She simply gave me a gentle smile, reassuring me it would all be okay. She drew closer to me. She continued rubbing my back, gently. Why was it that, before and even now, every time I thought I needed to be saved, Rimi would always heroically appear in front of me? I was thinking too, right? Like, okay, this is now me being maybe delusional about how, like, I was like, oh, Rimi kind of looks like Sarah, doesn't she? And then I was like, ever since, well, there's been a long time, it's been a long time since we've seen Sarah appear in his, I'm wondering, because, like, it's been a while since we've seen Sarah in his delusions, and I don't know if she has shown up anytime since Rimi was introduced, and we're learning about that Taku might be able to bring his delusions to life. So I'm wondering if Rimi is somehow, like, I don't know, a real version of Sarah that has appeared to help him. Maybe. And just especially a thing like heroically appear in front of me, right? Right now, Rimi was right here. And also the fact that, I mean, with the very opening of this game, she had like a magical transformation. Oh my gosh, magical transformation. She had a sword. Oh my gosh, is Rimi like a version of Sarah brought into the real world? I don't know. It reassured me. It felt better. Before I realized what was happening, my true feelings began to pour out, despite the fact I never talked about myself.
助けて。一人は怖いんだ。
Maybe that was why I bothered coming to school. Up until now, I'd always thought I'd be way better off alone. Of course, even now, it was still terrifying to talk to others. I wasn't at all confident in my ability to talk to anyone, but with Shogun and Yua trying to destroy my life, I had never been so anxious, scared, and alone. I wanted someone to be there for me. They didn't even need to be nice to me. I just wanted someone to be present.
一人は怖い。
Is this the turning point for Takumi right now? Is he going to become a better person now that he's opening up to someone and learning to trust them?
だったら
And being honest with himself instead of being like, I don't need all these NPCs in my life. Or whatever he calls them, DQNs.
私が一緒にいてあげる。
Those words held no ill will, no hesitation, no irresolution.
さすがに24時間ずっとは無理だけど。
Her shy gaze suddenly moved up toward the sky. Her eyes were looking so far away. Just what could she be looking at in that sky?
朝一緒に学校行って、学校では休み時間にどうでもいいこと話して、お昼休みは一緒にご飯食べて、夕方一緒に帰って、帰るついでにたまにどこかのお店に寄ったりして、タクの部屋でちょっとだけおしゃべりして、それでまた明日ねって手を振って別れて、そんなのでいいなら私いくらでもしてあげるよ。そういうの結構憧れなんだ。
Wasn't that kind of almost like being in a relationship? I was stunned. She was completely serious. I could see it on her face.
どうしてどうしてそこまでしてくれるの？
それは
Because? A flag if I'd ever seen one, right? Because I love you, Taku. I could see it coming from a mile away. That had to be what she was going to say, right? Granted, I had no clue why Rimi would have fallen for me. No, wait, this shit had to be bait. Something similar had happened before, with Yua. With her, it had all been nothing more than a deception, ending with me drowning in the depths of despair. Oh no, just as he's about to open up to someone, is he going to push her away? So I couldn't get my hopes up. I had to prepare for the worst. It was possible Rimi, too, was an end.
石
She suddenly saluted me. I was taken aback by the suddenness of it, and my mind shot to the possibility that she was about to reveal her true self. And yet, all I saw in Rimi's face was that same bright, gentle smile.
そんなの友達だからに決まってるでしょ。私にしてみればタクを助けてあげるのは当然なの。どうしてとか寂しいこと言わない。わかった？
うん。
Because we were friends. If she'd said, because I love you, Taku, and this is how I'm going to show it, it would have felt like my life had begun anew. But even if we'd be friends, that alone made me incredibly happy. Okay, good to know he's not like, oh, I got friend-zoned. Having someone being kind to me, having someone do things for me without expecting anything in return. I couldn't believe how happy it made me. It might have been the very first time I'd felt like that. But above all else, it made me realize I wasn't alone. To me, Rimi's existence was my salvation. The nausea I'd felt earlier had finally subsided, and I was feeling much better.
はい。使う？
Rimi held out a vermilion handkerchief. It had a faint floral scent. I meekly accepted it, but I was hesitant to use it.
汚しちゃっていいよ。タクにあげる。
ありがとう。
I felt guilty about it, but I ultimately decided I'd accept her generosity. I wiped off the vomit that had stained the corners of my mouth with the handkerchief. It was the first time I'd ever received a present from a girl that wasn't a family member. I wasn't so sure about calling it a present, though. For me, someone who was so isolated and helpless, even a simple thing like this felt like an irreplaceable treasure to me. I felt so delighted, so relieved that I nearly started to cry all over again.
それじゃあ帰ろっか。
Her voice was so carefree.
一緒に。
Apparently, she'd already intended to make good on what she'd said before, that she'd stay by my side. Not that I had told her whether I wanted her to or not yet. But it wasn't like I had any intention of saying no. Being alone terrified me. I didn't want to be alone. As I was now, I had no one to rely on but Rimi. However, I still couldn't say I was stable now, even with Rimi with me. On the way back, I chose to take a different route than usual, walking cautiously all the way. I couldn't stop trembling. Every corner with even an inch of shadow seemed dangerous. Every time I got to any kind of intersection, I was tormented by delusions of Yua or Shogun waiting for me at the end of it, making me freeze in place. Whenever that happened, Rimi would take over. She would look over toward the end of the intersecting road, and when the coast was clear, she'd nod to me.
大丈夫。誰もいないよ。
Relieved, I followed after her. Everything she'd done without even a hint of irritation.
ねえ。聞いていいかな。一体何があったの？
I was slightly hesitant to tell her. If I'd said something here, Rimi could become a target for Shogun. I would get her involved.
あ、話したくないなら無理に話さなくても。
いや、話すよ。
My mouth had already started moving. I definitely didn't feel comfortable with the prospect of getting her involved, but if I didn't explain to her what was happening here, she wouldn't be able to understand the gravity of the situation. For the sake of my well-being, I had to turn a blind eye to the possibility that it might put her in danger. She'd been the one who'd said she'd stay by my side, so I was sure she'd be fine with it. So I told her everything. I told her Shogun was the actual NewGen culprit, that Yua was one of his underlings, that they were both stalking me. What had happened in front of 107 the other day? I laid it all bare, albeit not without a fair share of stuttering. She's like, I regret this. Actually, damn it. Like, oh, he's weird. When I told her about the time Shogun appeared before in a wheelchair, Rimi's lips pursed, and she began to ponder. I'd always wanted to ask her about back then. It seemed like now was as good a time as any.
いたかな、車椅子のおじいさんなんて。
She certainly didn't sound like she had.
思い出して。大切なことだ。
でも
Rimi frowned almost like she was hesitant to say what was on her mind.
そもそもあの時渋谷の駅前が無人だったなんてことなかったよ。いつもと同じだった。
So that was what Rimi had seen back then. I was hoping she and I would agree on what we'd seen, but I guess not. Rimi or me, which one of us had seen what the area was actually supposed to look like? Had I been wrong about what I'd seen after all? Had that empty Shibuya been nothing more than a delusion? But if it was, then there was a small discrepancy. An old man had appeared in that empty Shibuya, Shogun. What was the explanation for that? If the Shibuya being empty part was a delusion, then Shogun could be a delusion as well.
駅前って人が多いでしょ。だから車椅子の人がいてもなかなか気がつかないだろうし。要するに見てないってこと。ごめんね、役に立てなくて。
At the very least, I knew Shogun himself wasn't a delusion. At first, I thought he was a delusion, but ever since the group dive video had come out, my perception of him had swapped to the exact opposite. Shogun was real. He existed in reality. But that empty Shibuya, meanwhile, it could have just been a delusion. And in reality, the front of the station had been overflowing with people, just like it always was. I was the only one who'd observed something different, a different set of scenery than everyone else. But how could that be possible?
ねえ、それよりお願いがあるんだけど、いい？
Rimi joined her hands together in a prayer-like gesture.
CD を買いに行きたいんだ。せっかくここまで来てからちょっと寄っていきたいんだけど、いいかな？
I really wanted to get back to my base as soon as possible. The reason I'd taken such a long detour was because I was afraid of the possibility that Yua or Shogun might have been ready to ambush me. It wasn't so I could go on a shopping spree. But if I were to refuse after all that, she might end up going back on her promise to stay by my side. If I were to fuck up badly enough, she could get angry and leave by herself. What the hell should I do? This sucked. I needed Rimi to stay with me. I wasn't sure I could make it to my base alone. In the end, I wasn't able to refuse, so I did what I had in order to survive, and stuck as close as possible to her. I guess it was reasonable to think Yua wouldn't attack me in a public place like this. But I was more afraid they might have been hiding among the crowd. Every time I would almost bump into someone, I would scream inside my head.
パトカーだ。
Oh, Rimi's words frightened me. I quickly retreated behind her. Rimi was right. There were 2 police cars parked on the road, and right next to them were 3 police officers in uniform. The police had also been pursuing me. Obviously, the basis behind it was a completely false accusation, but the incompetent police didn't know that. Those cops might have been searching for me too. Or so I thought, but that apparently wasn't the case. The cops' gazes were fixed on the crowd of people marching down the street like they owned it. Were they protesters or something? They were carrying these giant signs and flags and were wearing the typical sashes and headbands you'd see among those kind of people. There was a child marching along with his parents holding hands with both of them. He looked like he had no idea where he was. He was wearing a t-shirt with the words, "Whose eyes are those eyes?" written on them in permanent marker. I bit my lip.
何のデモだろうね。
The people marching were of all ages and genders. Their march was mostly silent and solemn, but at times they'd all echoed their chants. Drive the devil out of Shibuya. Expel his demons from this place.
悪魔。
On the signs were a number of different things, such as drive the devil out of town or protect Shibuya from terrorists. It must have been some sort of protest against the NewGen incidents. There was no point in protesting against that. If they had the time to do that, then could they please just hunt down Shogun and kill him? Then I wouldn't need to worry about him anymore.
タク、行こう。
Clearly uninterested, Rimi turned her gaze away from the protesters and quickly started walking toward the entrance to the CD shop. As soon as we entered the shop, Rimi headed straight toward the indie section. Unlike the J-pop section, there weren't many customers there. Rimi stopped in front of shelf P, then started looking— oh, Phantasm, right? Then started looking for the CD she wanted. But after a minute of browsing, her shoulders slumped.
やっぱりないな。
An indie group whose name started with P? Could that be...
タクはファンタズムってバンドを知ってる？今話題になってるけど。
So it was them. How could I not know them? I'd even gone to see their concert, and I owned a CD. I nodded and Rimi smiled.
私、そういう情報は結構疎くて、最近になって知ったんだ。それで、友達に借りようかと思ったんだけど、なかなか手に入らないらしくて、誰も持ってないんだよ。だから、CD 買うしかないかなって思って、ここ1週間ぐらいあちこち探してみたんだけど、どこも売り切れ中。次はいつ入るんだろう。
僕持ってる。
Rimi's eyes went
持
wide.
ってるって CD？
I showed her a nod, and when I did that, Rimi... Oh, alright. Well, we gotta do positive this time, right? Did negative last time. Put her hands on my shoulders. Oh boy, what delusion are we gonna get this time? She suddenly brought her face in closer to mine, which immediately made me flustered. The sweet smell of shampoo wafting from Rimi's hair tickled my nose, and I felt my face turning red.
ねえタク、取引しよう。
A deal?
その CD 貸してくれたら、見返りに私。
She looked at me, her expression dead serious. I gulped. She'll what? What was she going to do? Rimi's cheeks flushed slightly in embarrassment, and then, having seemingly made up her mind, she whispered something to me.
私のこと好きにしていいよ。
When I understood the meaning behind her words, my brain stopped computing. I couldn't tell if she was joking or being serious. I tried to look away, but before I could...
しゃがんで。
Oh my gosh. What? Rimi glanced at our surroundings, then pressed down on my shoulders hard. Without really knowing why, I obeyed her. I crouched down and leaned against the CD shelves, hugging my knees. Rimi also crouched down in front of me. I was completely lost. What the hell was she planning?
膝伸ばして。
Did she want me to sit directly on the floor? I didn't want to act like such a DQN, but Rimi didn't wait for my consent. She grabbed both my calves and forced my legs to straighten out. I couldn't stop myself from sliding to the floor. Oh boy, I hope this isn't too explicit. Right as my legs hit the floor, Rimi got on top of me. Rimi put her index finger on my lips. She wanted me to stay quiet, evidently. See, this is similar to what Sarah did in his delusion in the hospital. But doing something like this inside a store? As if she'd read my mind, Rimi started
こ
giggling.
こインディーズのコーナーってお客さんあんまり来ないよね。こうしてしゃがんだら周りから見えなくなっちゃう。
What was she implying?
タク、
Rimi moved her face in even closer. Her breath stroked my cheeks. It was hot. I couldn't avert my gaze from Rimi's shimmering eyes. I could feel myself being sucked right into them. It was like I was under some sort of magic spell. Rimi was staring straight at me, just as I was at her. As we stared at each other, Rimi's hands began to move. And then she started undoing my blazer, one button at a time.
何を。
Paying me no mind, Rimi's hand grabbed hold of my tie. With one pull, she unfastened it, and then she started unbuttoning my shirt.
ねえ、人が来る。
そうだね。人が来たらすごくまずいよね。
Despite what she had just said, Rimi's slender hands continued to move. They artfully slid beneath my shirt and onto my bare chest. Her cool hand slowly glided across my skin. What a bewitching smile. She had always been so cheerful and energetic, never once emitting any kind of sexual vibe or intention. But now the expression on her face made my heart throb.
タクの胸ドキドキしてる。
リミって、テラエロス。
テラエロス？
Oh god, I'd said that out loud. That alone went to show how shaken I really was.
それってどういう意味かな？教えてよ、タク。
It means you're so unbelievably sexy. Rimi's fingers steadily crept along my skin, and then they traveled down my neck. It tickled. It felt better than anything I'd ever felt before.
私のこと好きにしたくなってきた。
Following my instincts, I nodded
じゃ
repeatedly.
あここでしちゃうか。
I couldn't believe my own ears. Do it. Did she mean...
何を？
Okay, I'm glad it cut off there before it got really explicit.
おーい。
Suddenly, I came back to myself. Rimi was waving her hand in front of my face, her eyebrows furrowed in confusion. I wasn't sitting on the floor, and Rimi wasn't on top of me. We were just standing there facing each other, like people normally did.
どうしたの？急に意識がどこかに飛んじゃってたみたいだけど。
なんでもない。
落ち着け。
I took a step back from Rimi, turned my back to her, and took a deep breath. Holy shit, that had been the hottest delusion of all time. I was so fucked up, not to mention a self-loathing idiot. I couldn't believe I'd just thought that. Actually, no, forget that. Rimi was the one who was talking about giving me something in return. You'd see that line before in an infinite number of H scenes. Any guy who'd even dipped his toes into the genre would have had his imagination go wild over it. Anyway, what was she actually planning to do for me?
その調子だと話聞いてなかったでしょう。
うん。
じゃあもう一回言うけど、私のお気に入り CD を貸すっていうので手を打ってくれないかな。
は？
ねえねえ、いいでしょ？お願いします、この通り。
ああ。
Life was a cruel mistress, though I suppose it was my fault for expecting anything. Come to think of it, I wasn't supposed to be into 3D girls at all, and yet I just had a delusion about doing that with Rimi. Why? When I agreed to Rimi's proposal, she delightedly struck a victory pose. That sight was so amusing to me that, despite the critical situation I was in, I couldn't help but laugh. I managed to make it back to base safely, thanks to Rimi, of course. One thing ended up catching me off guard, though. When we arrived, I'd asked her to wait outside while I cleaned my room, but she flat out refused.
だって前に来た時に汚いっていうのはよーくわかったし、今さら片付けたって無駄だよ。かっこつけなくてもいいって私とタクの中でしょね。
Yeah, but I wish I knew what exactly that meant. Rimi was completely absent from my memory, meaning I didn't really know her. Every once in a while I'd find myself taken aback at how ridiculously friendly Rimi was whenever she talked to me. It wasn't unpleasant or anything, but it only made it all the more clear how different we felt about each other. On that particular note, was Rimi serious about there being no point in me cleaning my room? The floor was littered with empty boxed lunches, and the bed was piled high with eroge cases. Eroge cases with not exactly the most safe for work cover art. Either Rimi had nerves of steel or she had no reason to feel on edge around me, but trying to figure out which it was only made me feel more confused. I'm convinced now that Rimi is somehow Sarah, brought to life by his delusion, like he wanted someone to save him when things got to their worst, and all of a sudden, Rimi appears. Rimi, unaware of how distressed I was, went to sit on the sofa looking earnestly over the lyric booklet included in the Phantasm CD. I plopped down in my chair and the tension flooding my body left soon after. My mind was completely maxed after spending most of the day terrified, yet I wasn't feeling that exhausted. Maybe that was thanks to Rimi being there.
さて、どうしようか。
Closing the lyric booklet, Rimi stretched her arms out high and sent a smile my way. What should we do? What were we supposed to do? She hadn't come here to hang out or anything. She just wanted me to lend her a CD. She was doing me a favor by staying with me, but what the hell were we supposed to actually do? Did we have to do anything? If we were in an eroge, we'd probably jump straight into an H scene, but Wait, stop. I really shouldn't be thinking about that right now. Come on, man. I just gave you that green delusion. That's good enough for you for now. Even under the best circumstances, it was still a really tense situation, being alone in my room with a 3D girl and all. If I were to have some unwelcome delusions, I might suddenly shoot back to reality and end up saying something weird. Silence. Rimi was staring vacantly at the various manga scattered on the floor and the eroge piled up on the bed. Awkward. I knew that most of the awkwardness would dissipate if I just said something, but the only subjects I could think of were video games and anime. And I doubted Rimi knew anything about either. Wouldn't it be more logical for Rimi to say something? She was the one who had said she'd stay with me and all. This was going to be a bad time if she actually expected me to lead the conversation. Jesus Christ, I really did suck with 3D girls. I was grateful to her for staying with me, but I couldn't handle the sheer, unrelenting silence. The fact that the room barely had any light was also an issue. It gave off the illusion the room was dark for some lewd reason. Unable to take it anymore, I turned to face my PC. Wow, you sure know how to treat the ladies, don't you? It's just like, I'm just gonna ignore you. I needed to look up something. I'd been thinking about it at school. It might end up giving me a hint as to how I'd get my hands on a D-sword. Is it possible to translate images pictured in the mind to actual images? Using what Sana had told me about VR technology and people being electronic devices as a base, I began researching the topic.
何してるの？
Rimi stood up and approached my desk. Should I explain? But how to go about it? It would take forever if I told her everything.
ねえねえ、何してるか教えてよ。
Seeing no reaction from me, Rimi poked me in the back with her finger. I couldn't just ignore her, right? Yeah, it would never be that easy. Yeah, she's not your sister. You can't just do that.
君はその妄想が現実になるって信じられる？
As I entered a few keywords into the search bar, I spoke without looking at Rimi. Instead, I pretended I was talking to Seraton. Maybe you are talking to Sarah.
妄想が現実に？無理でしょう。もしそれができたら、人はとっくに万能になってるよ。
That's a good point, actually. Delusions created a world in which any action, no matter how unrealistic, was possible. If they were to become reality, the unreal would become real. Unreality would become reality.
それがどうしたの？
それに近いシステムがアメリカで特許あるんだ。
へえ、冗談でしょ。
I could feel Rimi's doubtful scoff on my back. So in response, I showed her the image of the patents Shiho had found for me.
これは？
特許の証拠写真。
え、本当に？
Rimi leaned forward and brought her face close to the monitor. She was right up next to my face, peering intently at the screen.
あ、私英語って苦手。すごいね、タク。英語読めるなんて。
She was way too close. She was so close I could see the glittering of her eyes as they reflected the light of the monitor. I got flustered all over
ねえ
again.
ねえ、どういうことか教えてよ。
It seemed it had piqued her interest. I tried to avoid thinking about how close she was to me and attempted to focus on Saratan and the monitor instead.
生まれながらに盲目の人でもビデオカメラみたいな映像機器を通すことでそこに映る景色が見えるようになるんだ。これ豆知識な。
ビデオカメラが目の代わりっていうこと？
そう。VR 技術って言うんだよ。
へえ。もし本当だったらすごいな。
But it is. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Senna told me there's already been successful tests.
でも機械を使って目が見えるようになるのと妄想が現実になるってどうつながるの？私頭悪いからよくわかんないや。
As I explained it to Rimi, I tried searching for a number of keywords that might have been related, but I couldn't find anything. Even so, I kept on trying and typed more and more
映像
keywords.
機器に映る景色も脳内で思い浮かべた妄想も電気信号だから。逆に考えるんだ。脳内に電気信号を送るんじゃなくて脳内から電気信号を送るって考えるんだ。
ほほう。
All I got were filler responses. She probably didn't understand a thing I was saying. Probably. I couldn't be bothered trying to explain everything in detail, so I just stopped trying. I had to concentrate on my research. It didn't really matter if she understood it or not. After all, it was nothing more than a hypothesis I'd come up with. Rimi was still making noises and nodding to herself. Time to ignore her. I'd been doing a whole lot of searching, but I still was unable to find any data to confirm my hypothesis. I tried taking a different approach, this time focusing on my research on the patent itself. I went and checked a foreign website that Shiho had told me about, one that listed American patents. Once I was there, I began to look for patents that would fit what I had in mind. After following a few links, I finally found an image with a similar vibe to the one Shiho had sent me. At a glance, though, the patent was clearly different from the VR apparatus one. I should read it right away.
神経信号パルスを遠隔地からモニターし、それを映像及び音声として再現する装置と方法。
おー
That was exactly what I'd had in mind. I involuntarily leapt out of my chair.
これすごいぞ。
Is this-
すごいの？何が
Is this the thing that shadow group was talking about? Like, controlling people?
簡単に言うとこれ。
So let's take a look. So satellite sends the signal to the person. Electric wave tower, data processing station, receiver.
他人の思考を盗撮する技術だ。
Ah.
思考盗撮
To sum it up, the audio and video people were imagining in their heads could be stolen by using a certain apparatus. Moreover, it even said nerve impulses could be monitored from satellites. That meant it was possible to spy on a subject's thoughts, no matter where they were on the planet. Now, there's one thing about spying on people's thoughts and reading their minds, but the thing that Senna was talking about and what that group seemed to be doing is actually controlling people's nerve impulses and like their nervous system and getting them to do whatever you want them to do. Something to that effect, I think.
本当にそんなことできるの？ SF 小説とかそういう類のものなんじゃ？
特許ってそのシステム自体が完全に仕上がってないと絶対に取得できないんだって。
That had been made clear to me when I'd been looking up stuff about patents earlier.
だからこれもちゃんとシステムが確立されてるってことだよ。
This wasn't mere fiction. As long as you had the technological capabilities and the funds to build it, you could implement it any time. Before, Senna had told me that
ある意図的な情報を神経パルスへコンバートすることが可能なら、人の五感すべて、さらには人の意志そのものもコントロールできるんじゃないか。
I couldn't find a source for that, so it remained as mere conjecture from her. However, for my own theory, there were sources. Why would something so insane not have spread all throughout Japan? This clearly deserved a Nobel Prize, if not something even bigger. I continued my research, this time looking up the mind-reading keyword. Then I found a record of a particular lawsuit from America.
また英文だ。頭痛くなってきそうだよ。
It was a really long document, so even I had a hard time reading it. It probably would read poorly, but I decided to use a piece of English to Japanese translation software. The contents of what were written there could be summarized like this. Legal record plaintiff N.K. Rabin, defendant, the United States Department of Defense, CIA. Plaintiff's allegations. I have become aware my mind has been read via the use of a peculiar device. My monitored thoughts are recorded and subsequently transferred to an unknown location using satellites. Yeah, this is something where if you heard it, you'd be like, oh, this person's just, like, having delusions, or this person is crazy. The aforementioned satellites have taken me hostage. I have been the victim of constant, unending attacks regardless of the time of day, all of which were carried out by those very satellites. Tracking, mind-reading, telepathic surveillance, monitoring of all bodily signals, biorhythmical attacks, oral attacks, physical debilitation. Since the latter third of December 1990, I have been forcefully shown artificially created dreams during my sleep, some of which include video, audio, and even voices. From February to May 1992, I have fallen victim to several biorhythmical attacks, all of which serve to torture me via the induction of pain and or psychological harassment. Recognizing that these attacks were aimed specifically toward myself, beginning February 1992, I began to record the following information in a journal: the date, time, and contents of any particularly agonizing psychological attack I could remember. So, are the delusions that Takumi is having, are they saying that they might be someone is giving him these delusions rather than him coming from his mind? Like, this seems like an actual lawsuit, because I have read some crazy lawsuits from people that obviously are suffering from some sort of mental crisis, schizophrenia, things like that, where it's just like they are paranoid delusionals, paranoid delusions, where it's like, it seems like that, where it's like they feel like they're being specifically targeted, usually by like the CIA or the government or things like that. But in this world, it could possibly be true. The biorhythmical attacks were aimed at every single region of my body. The pain, torture, and psychological harassments were coordinated in order to cause discomfort, fatigue, and agony to a specific region of my body, or in some cases, my entire body. The main regions affected are as follows: chest, visual system, abdomen, brain, to induce sleeping disorders, brain, to show me artificially created dreams.
思考監視、思考盗撮、しかも国家ぐるみ。マジ？
私これ知ってる。何年か前に映画で見た。
That was fiction, though. But what was written on these records very much wasn't. There were two possibilities. Either the plaintiff was a total mental case, or the entire thing was factual. It was difficult to figure out where exactly the boundary between the two was. Taking into account the patent from earlier, it could very well be truthful. So Senna and Ayase weren't total mental cases, particularly Ayase. Back then, Ayase had cloned herself right before my very eyes. I hadn't witnessed the exact moment when it had happened. All I knew was that when I turned around, another Ayase was there, and she had been wearing lingerie for some reason. She had also shown me how she pulled her D-sword out of thin air. It had been neither a hallucination nor a delusion. After showing me something like that, there was no way I could still label her as a mental case. However, Ayase had also said this. That strange phenomenon, had it been my delusion coming to fruition? Admittedly, right before it had happened, I had been pondering about the color of Ayase's underwear. Maybe that was what Ayase had been talking about when she'd mentioned the power? A power that projected delusions into reality. Maybe I had that power. No, I was probably just jumping to conclusions. Let's do bad one. Did good last time. It was a total stretch to think a psychic ability existed just because something, a system using scientific means, was able to reproduce delusions as images. But what if the method to obtain a D-sword was by using such a psychic ability? So let's suppose I had that ability within me. It might have been worth a try. Leaving Rimi to stare at the PC screen with her eyebrows furrowed, I picked up the toy D-sword sitting in the corner of my room. I went to stand in the center of my room and brought my sword to eye level like I was an ESO character. At that point, I started to feel kind of ridiculous. There was no way a skinny Japanese guy like me would look cool holding such a huge sword. It was easy to find pictures of cosplayers doing the same thing online, but the vast majority of them just felt painful to look at. Someone would probably feel the same way about me if they saw me like this. This might have been asking for the impossible. Despite my pessimism, I gave it a try nonetheless. I guess I just needed to picture an image of a sword in my head. When the word sword came to mind, I couldn't help but think about ESO. Maybe I should picture something akin to the beautiful, sinister swords that Senna and Ayase had, each complete with a sharpness that could sever anything it touched. I couldn't quite form a clear shape. Maybe it was because I still couldn't gather my thoughts. I needed to focus on either an actual sword from ESO or a sword like Senna's and Ayase's. If I had to choose between them, I should really go for the latter. Alright, let's see where this leads me. So I'm wondering if I had chosen the positive one, would he have picked the other option? While reproducing one as a delusion inside my head, I planted my feet, gritted my teeth, and tried grasping the sword with the power I now held in my hands. I prayed as hard as I could inside my head. Become
やめ
real.
て。
Suddenly, something warm and soft covered one of my hands holding the sword. Startled, I opened my eyes. Rimi had reached out her hand from beside me and grabbed my wrist. Her head hung low, her eyebrows were furrowed in distress, and her lips trembled slightly. What the? Something was wrong. It felt like she was an entirely different person from the one that had been getting all confused about patents earlier. And what was she telling me to stop? An unpleasant memory flashed through my mind. Rimi was on my side. She was supposed to be. However, I still hadn't solved the mystery surrounding her. Did Rimi know something about D-swords? With a gulp, I nervously called out to her.
タク、
With her eyes cast downward, Rimi opened her mouth. Her voice was stifled, devoid of any and all emotion.
その件だけど、
Rimi was my ally, wasn't she? She wouldn't betray me like Yua did, would she? If even Rimi betrayed me, I'd...
捨てた方がいいと思う。
どうして
My voice nearly cracked. Did Rimi know something after all?
だって、
Rimi's gaze finally moved, but this time it landed squarely on my eyes. I hurriedly averted my own. What was she going to say?
だって、もう高校生だし。
は
Rimi suddenly broke into a grin, a very mischievous grin. The abrupt change in demeanor left me speechless.
そりゃ男の子っていくつになってもそういうおもちゃが大好きなんだなーってのはなんとなくわかるけど、さすがにそんな大きなおもちゃ一人で部屋で振り回してるのはどうかと思うよ。
He's like, I'm not alone. You're here.
それが許されるのは小学生までじゃない？でもタクの個人的な趣味を私の前で披露してくれたってのはちょっと嬉しいかも。私にだけ秘密を教えてくれたみたいで。
Oh, what the hell, man? I'd gotten all scared for no reason.
そもそもそれどこで買ってきたの？高かったんじゃない？
1万円渋谷の雑貨屋で。
へえ、1万円か。安いのか高いのかわからないけど。でもそんな大きなおもちゃが普通に売ってるんだね。私そんな大きなのを直接見たのって初めて。その雑貨屋さんに売ってるっていうのは誰かに教えてもらったの？
She really wasn't going to let it go. Was she interested in these kinds of swords or something? Maybe Rimi was actually a total chunibyo in disguise. So, the one who'd been making fun of me for having a sword actually wanted one herself? Tsundere much? Hoo-hee-hee. It's been a while since she's done that little laugh.
自分で調べたネットで。
ネットか。すごいな。何でも情報が手に入るんだね。私は全然ダメ。パソコンなんてろくに使えないよ。で、その件って流行ってるの？
なんで
Like, what high schooler is not good at using a computer? This takes place in what, like 2008? Like, if it was the early 2000s, I could maybe understand, but come on. All the more reason I'm thinking somehow maybe she's Sarah, and like, why would Sarah, a fictional character, know how to use a computer? I could be delusional myself, but that's my theory right now anyway.
タクはどうしてそれを買おうと思ったのかなって。
Maybe I should just tell her the truth. If she was going to stay by my side moving forward, maybe she'd end up helping me search for a real D-sword in the future. If that was the case, it might be better to just tell her everything now and get it out of the way.
これは偽物だけど本物があるんだ。
本物？
Rimi tilted her head, puzzled.
本物を持ってる人僕知ってるんだ。 二人いる同じ学校の女子。
女子ね。女の子がこんなおもちゃを欲しがるかな。
本当なんだ。それにおもちゃじゃない。
あ、ごめん。
本物は光るんだ。それにすごい存在感で。僕それを探してる。それさえ手に入れれば僕は救われるんだ。
救われるって。
Rimi looked quite puzzled, but I was dead serious. Not to mention a D-sword would be a powerful tool to confront Shogun.
それで鉄。
I wanted to say I needed her help to find it. However, when I thought about what I could even do if she said no, I grew too scared and anxious to say anything. I dropped the fake sword on the spot and sat down on the sofa. With a sigh, I closed my eyes. Would Rimi offer me her help in order to find it? If she did, everything would turn out okay. But I knew how unrealistic it was to expect her to go that far. Up until now, Rimi had always come dashing to my rescue whenever I was in a tough spot. Almost like she could read my mind. Hey, what do they say about mind reading? So many questions I have about Rimi. In that case, maybe I...
とにかく、
Oh, did he like...
もし本物があったとしても、
Did he
それこそ買
control?
ったりしちゃダメだよ。
Here's the
今
whole
タクが
thing.
持ってるのはおもちゃだからいいけど、本物ってことは銃刀法違反になっちゃうんだから。
It's just the whole thing about, like, his delusions becoming reality, relying on Sarah to, like, save him and help him out, and all of a sudden Rimi shows up. Looks suspiciously like her, and just always seems to show up when he needs her. It's almost like he has created Rimi. But if that's the case, how does what's his name, Masumi? How does, like, he know her? Oh, there's so many questions, so many possibilities it could be. Or someone has somehow erased his memories of knowing her. My hopes were crushed instantly. What an insane disappointment. Then again, Rimi's reaction made sense from the POV of an average person. These past few weeks, I'd encountered so many inexplicable things, I was nearly at the point where I was ready to believe everything that Senna and Ayase had said. Maybe Ayase was right. I had to find a D-sword entirely on my own.
それでタク、
I felt Rimi sit down next to me.
その本物の剣を持ってる女子って誰かな。
Her voice came from very close by. She was right next to me. It was just the two of us in an enclosed, dimly lit room, and we were sitting right next to each other. Emergency! Everyone, battle stations! Emergency!
タクに女子の知り合いが私以外にいたなんてちょっとびっくり。もしかして彼女？
So that's where she was going with this. Could it be Rimi was trying to seduce me? The only possible conversation that could result from this topic was one centered on romance. After I told her the truth, she'd give me her confession, and then the mood would start getting really hot and heavy. And then... Oh god, I couldn't do this. I wasn't even remotely prepared for this. I opened my eyes and frantically shook my head. Both Ayase and Senna were mysterious creatures, not to mention absolute mental cases. Schizo didn't even begin to describe them. I'd have moe'd over them if they were 2D characters, but I'd never moe over 3D shit. Okay, sir, as you're talking about all of the fantasies you're having about Rimi, especially with Senna, talking to her scared me. It wouldn't surprise me if violence was part of her MO. I wanted to stay as far away from her as possible.
そっか。ちょっと安心したかな。
え？
Ooh, let's go positive, right? I mean, come on, what way is he going to interpret that? Flag trips, that's why we're going to pick green. It would have been funny if I'd picked red and it would have been something completely different. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. My whole body froze in place. She'd clearly said that on purpose, right? Was she subtly hitting on me right now? Judging from the flow of this conversation, there was a good chance Rimi had me right where she wanted me. How should I answer? Should I just come out and say exactly what she wanted to hear? Yeah, surely nothing bad could come from that. But I wasn't sure I had the confidence to go out with a real girl. I was at a loss about what to do, so I opted to subtly examine Rimi's expression. Once again, we don't have the... Whoa! Whoa, okay, at first I was like, oh, there's no waves happening here. But he can create delusions, right? It's like what he did with Ayase. What the hell? What the hell? My mind went completely blank. I couldn't keep up with the sudden and outrageous turn of events. I couldn't even lift a finger. The shock had rendered me unable to speak.
どうかした？
In the blink of an eye, Rimi had stripped off her school jacket, and not just that, but upon taking a closer look, she'd removed her skirt too. As if her extreme outfit wasn't enough, she was also hugging her knees, making it look like she was completely commando. In other words, at this very moment, Rimi, who was sitting right next to me with her head tilted and her eyes on me, was covering her underwear with nothing more than a mere shirt. First thing that popped into my head was a classic private tutor eroge, titled The Unrelenting Emily Sensei. The third chapter had a scene that went exactly like what I was experiencing right now. To think something straight out of an eroge was actually happening to me in reality. What eroge was that from? Reality? WTF? Was this a delusion? An illusion? Or was it legit? Regardless of whether it was a delusion or not, there was no mistaking that Rimi was dressed in an incredibly lewd outfit. See, her response makes it think that he's only imagining this, similar to like with Ayase. Against my better judgment, my eyes aimed themselves toward her chest. The neck of her shirt went down to her breast, and thanks to the angle I was looking at her from, I could see what was underneath. A bright pink bra. You have surprisingly large breasts, Sakihita-san. Or Sakihata-san. Wait, stop. She'll think you're a pervert if you ogle her like that. Don't look. Stop looking. I lowered my gaze, only to find myself looking at her hips. Holy fucking Joffo foot. She really wasn't wearing a skirt. I can see your panties, Sakihata-san. What a simple yet lovely pair. This would make some excellent fat material. Ugh. Oh my god, my Johnson is starting to make himself very known. Her body had been giving off a nice scent for a while. And how should I put it? The texture of her skin, combined with her amazing figure, it all put 2D to shame. Was this the true power of the third dimension? Not gonna lie, she was hot as fuck. She seemed very capable of instantly obliterating the values I'd held dear until now, even though I'd never been into 3D, nor had I ever planned to change that, even though I'd only ever loved 2D characters. Right now, Rimi held enough destructive power to obliterate those lofty values with a single strike. Her faint breaths, which sounded almost aroused, the delicately swaying, lustrous hair, the way her chest rose and fell with each breath, the manner with which she seductively rubbed her thighs together, those shimmering eyes, the pink tongue peeping out from her partially open lips. It was getting hard to breathe. My mind was in a completely other dimension. What was this feeling? It was akin to those agonizing feelings of yearning I felt whenever I started an H scene in an eroge. I couldn't keep calm.
ねえ、タク。
Rimi called my name in a sickly sweet voice. My eyes were now permanently glued to her body. It was the first time I'd ever seen a physically mature girl up so close. Was Rimi trying to seduce me? Did she like me? If so, I had to admit, I wasn't a fan of how shamelessly she was going about it. I guess it was just I preferred love to come from the subtle nurturing of platonic affection, and once graduation arrived, that love would come to fruition through a bashful confession spoken under the Oak of Legends. Having mustered so much courage to say that to me, she then cried tears of joy when I said yes, leading us to kiss, and then... Well, that was what I wanted. The current way things were going was far from platonic.
私、喉乾いてきちゃった。何か飲み物ある？
Unable to endure the horniness any longer, I eagerly rose to my feet. What did I have? What did I have? Was there anything in the fridge? I had some half-finished cola, but I drank directly from the bottle, so it probably wouldn't be the best idea to give it to Rimi.
ないなら買ってこようかな。コンビニって深センの駅前にあったよね。
I felt Rimi stand up
ちょっ
behind
と行っ
me.
てくる。
え
She was leaving? I frantically turned around to see Rimi, still dressed in that shameless outfit, opening the door to head outside. She was gonna go to the convenience store while people could see her panties? She wasn't normal. Was Rimi an exhibitionist or something?
露出鏡
He was imagining it. He said it out loud. Hearing that behind me made me literally jump in the air and land on my ass. There stood Rimi, who should have been just about to leave the room. And not only that, but she was wearing her usual outfit, and it was all fully on. She looked down at me with wide eyes.
びっくりした。急に大声出さないでよ。さっきから変だよ。一人でブツブツ言い出したかと思ったら急に大声上げるし。どうかしたの？
Why was Rimi there now? She should have been just about to leave the container. Had that half-naked Rimi been a delusion? But she'd felt so real. I hadn't touched her, but merely looking at her skin made me think how squishy and soft it would be if I touched it. Wait, what the hell was I saying? I was losing my mind today. Just today? I cringed when she called my name. Did she hate me now? What would I do if she was already fed up with me? If Rimi wouldn't stay with me, I wouldn't even be able to go out alone anymore.
私、喉乾いてきちゃった。何か飲み物ある？
She'd asked me the exact same thing as before. However, rather than the sultry tone from before, her voice was perfectly normal now. I shook my head from side to side. Rimi poked her temple with her index finger and pursed her lips in thought.
ないなら買ってこようかな。コンビニって深センの駅
Okay,
前
so
にあったよね。
so he is imagining things happening before they actually happen.
ちょっと行ってくる。
She gave me a big smile, then left without waiting for my response. I could only watch her leave in a daze. She was going to the convenience store in uniform, which was completely normal. That half-naked Rimi from before really had been a delusion. I felt a mixture of both relief and slight disappointment. But that half-naked Rimi, ISA, splitting in two, what kind of mechanism was capable of reproducing those delusions accurately enough to feel real? Had it even been that, though? Did I have powers or not? And if I did, how could I actively use them? How could I obtain a D-sword? I was still stuck deep in a maze of questions, unable to do anything but wander around aimlessly. While Rimi went out shopping, I went back to researching the patent and mind-reading. When I reached my computer, I noticed that Grim had entered the chat room and was looking for me. Okay, you there, Nineheart? Hello. Neating as usual, I see. Come on, kid, chat with me, please. I've got new info. Okay. Look who finally decided to show up. You're too slow, Nineheart. Thanks to that, I have entered Whose Eyes Are Those Eyes mode. Damn it, the fuck was Whose Eyes Are Those Eyes mode? Grim obviously just wanted to use the phrase for the hell of it. Even though he knew I hated seeing that goddamn thing, I'd always freak out whenever I saw it. What kind of new info? NewGen, obviously. It happened, bro. The fifth case! Oh shit, of course I felt the usual depression I always felt whenever I heard about NewGen, but on the other hand, I was also bewildered. I was sure Shogun and Yua would target me this time. My fate had been delayed, it seemed. Though I wasn't sure whether or not to be happy about that. Want to know the deets? It's on the Taboo homepage, a quick search to tell you everything. What time today did it happen? Not today, they found the body last night, but the victim died the day before. Oh, this time is seriously insane. The dead guy's brains were removed. Without warning, Grim started telling me the details of the case, and I began to panic. I was beyond done with all this gory shit. I didn't want to hear about any of it. If I got word of it, I might imagine myself getting brutally murdered in the same way. Even though I still hadn't found out how to get a D-sword. And yet, Grim continued mercilessly. It was seriously freaky, dude. What do you think the cause of death was? Drumroll, please. Emaciation, which means he was alive even after his brains were removed. The repulsiveness of it sent chills down my spine. I wrapped my arms around my body. I didn't want to hear any more. Spare me, please, I'm begging you. My life already went to shit a long time ago, so please. Apparently he was in a state kind of like brain death, just sitting there brainless. He might have been like that for over a week. No wonder he died of emaciation. That channel already named the case Numbskull. Netizens really are epic at names. This part's hilarious, get this. The victim was a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist had their brains removed. Actual WTF levels of irony. A psychiatrist. Oh, shit. Okay, wait. I'm trying to think. No. The guy was a doctor, not a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist. The moment I saw that word, my heart rate skyrocketed. I might have been overthinking it, but I had to check to make certain. But I also didn't want to. Is it? Is he worried that it's his doctor? Oh shit, that'd be crazy, but it's because he's been missing for a while, right? And if he was emaciated, it would take a while to die. After hesitating on and off for a while, I eventually went to the homepage of Taboo and opened the news article reporting on the numbskull incident. All right, let's see. Oh, Dr. Takashina. Okay. Oh, he is a psychiatrist. Why did I think he was just like a doctor, a regular doctor? Okay, let's see. Early morning on the 23rd, the body of 41-year-old Takashina Fumio was discovered in the streets of Shibuya Ward. The victim, Dr. Takashina, was a psychiatrist at Tokyo General Hospital, also found in Shibuya Ward. The TMPD has released the cause of death, stating the man died via emaciation due to severe malnutrition. As well as this, Dr. Takashina's head was found to have received a clean cut along the top of his skull, and his brain was removed. The authorities claimed it was possible he survived in a state akin to brain death long after the removal of his brain. The investigation revealed Dr. Takashina had not shown up to work ever since the 10th of this month, and is now, well, this would be the 24th, because they said they found him yesterday.
なんてことだ。なんて。
The victim's name was Takashina Fumio. Dr. Takashina had been killed. He was provoking me. Shogun was blatantly provoking me. To do that, he'd killed the only doctor I could rely on, just to set an example.
そんな。助けて、誰か助けてくれ！
I let out a scream. My mind was in complete disarray. I felt like I was on the brink of snapping.
やだ死にたくないよ死にたくないリミ助けて
Oh, he's saying Rimi, not Sarah. I searched for Rimi. I frantically looked around the room over and over. She wasn't there. She wasn't there. She wasn't there. Why wasn't she there? Because she just went out shopping. Is he thinking she's going to be next because she's close to him? I lay down on the ground, clutching my head.
助けてリミ助けてよどこにも行かないで頼むよ
Someone responded to me. Shocked, yeah, this is strange, right? Shocked, I looked up to find Rimi standing beside me holding a convenience store bag.
リミ
And the fact she doesn't question any of this, right? She just is like, okay, I'm here. She'd come back, thank goodness. Relieved, I held out my hand. Rimi crouched down and embraced my hand with both of hers. Her hands had been cool when she touched me before, but now they felt so unbelievably warm.
ここにいる私はここにいるから怯えないで
Using her finger, Rimi wiped my tears away with a gentle smile. How pathetic could I be? I wasn't a man at all. Showing how terrified I was, crying and screaming in front of a girl. And yet, even while knowing how pathetic I was, she'd still said that she would stay by my side. Right now, this warmth I felt was the only thing keeping my mind from shattering. Until I got a D-sword, I never wanted to let her go. Alright guys, well with that, the 5th case is officially happening. The fact that it is targeting someone that was somewhat close to Takumi is a little out there, but it could just be a coincidence. But yeah, getting more into the whole thing about delusions. Can he control the delusions? Also, that whole thing with Rimi is pretty crazy. Just like, I don't know what to think about her. I have my theory about her. I could be totally off on that, but whenever he calls for her, she just suddenly appears. He sees her as like his savior. I think maybe he has created her in a way to like help him out. I'm not sure what to think about Rimi. She's a very mysterious character. And the whole thing, like with this case, is it connected to Takumi in some way? Was he the one who killed the doctor without realizing it? Like maybe he was angry at him for not remembering him or helping him. So it's like maybe subconsciously he killed him. There's still so much I don't know. And then he's on the search for the D-sword, trying to figure out how to create his delusions and make them a reality. It seems like with this, he seems to like be aware that he's capable of maybe doing this. It's just how to harness it and harness the power. But yeah, I definitely would like want to know more about like what's Rimi's whole deal and the details of the case and everything. I'm sure we'll learn more about that next episode, but this one was very interesting and gives me a lot to think about. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned next week for part 10. Until then, bye. Special shoutouts to my top tier patrons: Revealing Storm, Chris Wagstaff, Lynn's VA, Kenju Storm, and iCognito.